We're going to talk about the future of ice and snow, the water elements that truly manifest winter as we've known it. I'm going to introduce several people here when I get to the end of the introduction. If you all would come up, that would be great. First of all, let me introduce to you Sarah Lewis, a highly experienced global sports leader serving as the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Secretary General of FISU. Now, Ms. Lewis has had an incredible career and a long list of accomplishments as an athlete for Great Britain in administration, business, media, and international governing. In 2018, she was awarded the Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire on the late Queen's New Year Honors List for service to sport. That is an incredibly high honor. Absolutely. You can come on up. Come on up and take your seat. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Coming next to the stage, the Executive Director, Mike Pratt, will represent the Olympic Regional Development Authority. Mike, where are you? Come on up. Had a chance to chat a few minutes ago. Next is Natalie Knowles, a Canadian conservationist and explorer focused on social, economic, and environmental sustainability in adventure. Come on up, Natalie. Travel and recreation as well. Hello there. How are you? Come on up. And Meta Bergwall is the Eastern Region Sustainability Manager at Vail Resorts. And she has more than 10 years of experience in investigating, evaluating, and presenting information about environmental risk, strategy, and sustainability. So come on up. Let's welcome her to the stage. Thank you for the help with that name. All righty. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming back after lunch. And traditionally, it's a time in many parts of the world to have a siesta. But we're going to do our best to keep you really engaged. And not only everybody here in the room, but the many, many hundreds who are following online. So in Europe, it's already the evening. And they will hopefully have enjoyed a wonderful day. But here in Lake Placid, you can well imagine that, and certainly would be the case if we had our way, that we'd be enjoying the snow outside today and then joining online. So for those of you who are actually in the room, thank you very much for spending the time to be with us. So when we had our preparation discussion about 10 days ago, Carlin brought up a really good point. Why do we love snow so much? What's the attraction? Well, I think that days like today, and for those of you who walked here or came outside before now, you realize that it underlines the uplifting effect of a day like this, what we call a bluebird day. I don't know if you have a special expression for it, bluebird? Okay, that works. That's a good international expression. You know, they have really an uplifting effect on our sense of well-being. They really do. And yeah, so thanks to the technology that we have now, people are enjoying being outside with their families, following the competitions. They're on the slopes, they're around the lake, and they can catch up with us later on. So greetings to you all, wherever and whenever you're with us. And so why is snow so important, and what's its attraction? And well, here we are in Lake Placid, and towns like Lake Placid and the Adirondack region rely heavily on snow for the livelihood of the community, and not just in winter, I want to point out, actually. You know, thanks to the beautiful lake that you have here, you've got lots of nice summer activities too. And actually, you know, the snow plays an important role with the lake being refilled by the melted snow. But we're not going to focus too much on the past and even the current situation, only potentially to set the scene from some of the great input that we're going to get from our panelists. But the main focus is to address what the major North American and even international ski resort owners are doing in regard to ensuring snow for the future in a sustainable and a responsible way. At FISU, the organisers here of the FISU World University Games 2023, the International Sports University Federation, we really do care a great deal about the future of snow. Not only because we're based in the heart of the Alps in Lausanne, Switzerland, and we're looking out over the mountains all the time, we're a short distance from them, but also for the organisation of this very important event, for the best university sports athletes on the planet, the best students. And that, a lot of people depend on that. And this event needs to be a sustainable event, and not that we're trying to find corners of the world where there could be some snow, or everything is moved indoors into facilities that are refrigerating and coming up with special techniques. And it's not only for the elite athletes, but it also is being outside, getting this fresh air, clean white snow. It's also a very significant part of our Healthy Campus program, which you can look up. And that is a program for all signed up universities that really engages with all students, not just elite athletes, but all of them, that they are taking care of their welfare and their well-being at a very influential part of their lives, the first time that they leave home in many cases. But before we hear from our esteemed panelists, and I said I wouldn't reflect too much on the past, but I just want to share some personal reflections. I've been involved in ski and snow sports for 40 years, full-time, from 1980 to 2020, firstly as a ski racer, and then working in the ski industry, running the national team and the program in Great Britain, and then working for the International Ski Federation, living in the Alps in Switzerland for more than 28 years, which is where we live for the foreseeable future as well. And over the years, the snow conditions in our country, in our region, they varied, but I wouldn't say there's sort of a consistent trend to definitively state it's got warmer, progressively warmer, with more or with less snow. But what's certainly the case is that the weather is much more extreme, much more turbulent. The changes have been more dramatic and more turbulent. This year, for example, we had really cold and early snowfall in November. And then, over Christmas and New Year, we had the warmest temperatures that I've certainly seen there since we've been there for nearly 3 decades. 20 degrees centigrade, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. 68 degrees Fahrenheit in the mountains on New Year's Day. I mean, I was in a t-shirt on my bike outside. That's just crazy. So Mike, turning to you, Order, the Olympic Regional Development Authority. You're the owners here of 5 very important ski resorts. You run them. And tell us what your organisation has accomplished to help combat climate change, and we'll look on that for now, and then we'll move ahead later on.
Okay. Is this microphone working? This is the only wireless one.
Not yet.
I'm not sure. Okay. The green light's on. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, thanks, Sarah. Hey, we've been committed to environmental programs and sustainable improvements for many, many years. We've been recognized with a lot of awards and certificates for these efforts. But, not to bore you with what those were, I think the accomplishments and the commitment is what's really important. Gore Mountain has 5.3 megawatts of solar that's devoted to the facility. Whiteface Mountain is 2.6 megawatts of solar. We've been trying to look at everything, small components like LED lighting and building systems, to large components like the drives on our lifts and transformers, and then the snowmaking system is the biggest energy producer, and we've been very successful in increasing our pump house utilization, which allows us to make the same amount of snow quicker so that we can operate our compressors less and less, and we do that with less energy then. So It's a holistic commitment to every decision we make in operations and planning, and that's allowed us to continue to improve our sustainability efforts. Hey, and I have to say, to go back to Sarah's introduction of why we all love snow, I showed her this earlier, but now just so everyone understands who they're listening to, my pin here says, "Quit work, go skiing."
Meta, Vale Resorts. Tell us about Vale Resorts. How are you addressing climate change and the future of snow? You've got plenty to share. Vale Resorts, by the way, has 41 resorts, mostly in North America, but also a very important resort in Switzerland, Andermatt, in the center of the country, and several in Australia? Three in Australia. And there aren't too many more than Australia. And Martin, our executive committee member from FISU, who's responsible for our sustainability committee, he's listening up.
Awesome. Well, yeah, my name is Maida. I'm from Vale Resorts, and really want to get across the message that we are committed to protecting these incredible places that we live, we work, and we play in for the future generations. So, climate change is absolutely one of the most serious issues facing not only the ski industry, but the whole world. And so in 2017, Vale Resorts, we set our sustainability goal, Commitment to Zero. So Commitment to Zero is a pledge to be zero net operating footprint by 2030 through zero net emissions, zero waste to landfill, and zero net operating impact on forest and habitat. So we've made a lot of progress since 2017. One of our most exciting this year, we have an 82 wind turbine wind farm that allowed us to be 100% renewable electricity across our North American resorts this year. So that was a really big stepping stone in hitting our zero net emissions goal. We also have a solar farm coming online, hopefully this year, in Utah that will fully offset Park City's electricity. And so we'll continue to look at renewable sources locally, and then where we can implement. Probably most of you know that the zero waste to landfill will be our most challenging goal. With resorts spread across cities and counties and states, and even, as Sarah mentioned, countries, the landscape for waste reduction is a real challenge. But we've spent this last year looking at timeline, looking at costs, looking at capital plans and behavioral change campaigns that we can implement. So while it may be, a bumpy road to get there, we're confident in getting to that waste reduction goal. And we've always said that if you're not setting goals so big that you're initially sure how you're going to meet them, then they're not big enough to solve climate change.
Absolutely true. Fantastic. University of Waterloo, based in Ontario in Canada, you've been carrying out some very important research, studying all of the recent, I would say more recent, previous Winter Olympic sites in order to look ahead for the future and the feasibility that they have in terms of being able to carry out the event and even to serve their role as snow resorts. Bearing in mind, for those of you who are perhaps not aware, that the IOC has postponed the decision to confirm or to even enter into dialogue with a preferred candidate for the 2030 Games. And they've put that back to next year. So this research plays a very important role for them. They're talking now about potentially having a small group of future games hosting cities and rotating them between them. So we're intrigued to hear a lot about your findings in terms of the future of snow, but also then perhaps specifically about the North American resorts, which is an area that you've come on to afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done some research looking at, what ski seasons are like across the world, at all the previous Olympic Winter Games, and then projecting the impacts of climate change into the future. So looking at, what the snow levels might be, what the season lengths might be in the specific cases of the Winter Olympic Games. We're looking at what the conditions will be like in the future. And across the board, we're seeing warmer temperatures, more of that rain on snow that we're experienced here in Lake Placid, where we've got rain for a few days in the middle of a winter period and then snow on top, creating some difficult conditions. But the most exciting thing I think that our research has found is that there's a huge difference in the future conditions between a high emissions scenario. So if we continue emitting carbon at the same rates that we're emitting them now, the impacts are going to be much larger, versus if we can meet those Paris Agreement goals, our results are much more promising. So we're seeing longer winters, colder temperatures, more snow, and especially, the Olympic research was really looking at the conditions that are preferable for athletes. So those hard snow conditions that alpine ski racers want to compete on, those hard, consistent conditions. Same for freestyle athletes or Nordic athletes. They don't want that mushy snow, that challenging conditions. So the difference between a high emission future and a low emissions future is really drastic, and also, I think a really hopeful outcome of our results for everybody. And then looking more specifically at North America, we're seeing across the board the trends are shorter seasons, so a later start to snowfall and a later start to the conditions that are necessary to make snow, and an earlier end to those conditions. But there's still a lot of promise, and a lot of regions that are more resilient than others. We see Quebec and Alberta, some higher elevation resorts are much more resilient to those impacts of climate change. So, but general trends are again the same, with that high emission scenario being more drastic than a low emission scenario. And
yeah, it's not only about the elevation, though, is it? As our friends from Sweden can confirm, you've had a fabulous winter season so far in Scandinavia. Actually, it's been cold and loads of snow, and of course, they're down at sea level, but it's a higher latitude, and so winter there has been terrific. But I think we're here in the heartland of order, and these guys who've prepared these magnificent venues. Talking to Verena, who leads our education committee at FISU. The German athletes are absolutely thrilled with the quality of the facilities, the preparation of the courses, and the attention that's been given to them. And that is the heart and soul of the FISU World University Games, and the Lake Placid Organising Committee has done a really tremendous job preparing them, and that's thanks to what you've put in place. But Mike, you're going to share with us in terms of what your organisation, what Order has accomplished to really help combat climate change.
Again, Sarah, I think it's just been a commitment, a long-term commitment to consider the impacts of climate change, what's sustainable in all our decision-making through our planning and operations. A lot of the simple things, become common sense when you look back at it. So. And the previous panel I mentioned at Mount Van Hovenberg, which is hosting the biathlon and the cross country, as well as the Nordic part of the jumping combined events. There's 6 Olympic sports that train there, and we embraced multi-use occupancy with 1 lodge, 1 event administrative suite with a location for the drug testing facilities, and 1 awards plaza. And you know, in hindsight, it just seems like such a common sense approach. But when we came up with this concept, there was a little bit of pushback, and you know, whether it was the snowboarders and skiers mentality in different sports, but you know, it's turned out to be very positive. And you know, with the Olympic Center, we have 3 indoor ice rinks and the outdoor oval. And we had an opportunity to replace the 1977 vintage refrigeration equipment. And by code, we had to install a commercial system. Through our value engineering, we chose to install an industrial system. It required us to purchase an additional piece of equipment, but we're operating at apples to apples with 180 less horsepower. And we we're able to capture the waste heat from the compressors to heat all the hydronic glycol in our radiant systems at the entrances to the facility. So we're benefiting from these decisions immediately, but it's also providing a better customer experience. The buildings are cleaner when they walk in without the salt and sand on the at the entrances and being tracked through. And you know, of course, the community benefited from it, from us not overloading the grid and trying to be as efficient as possible. So there's a lot of decisions that are made when they're discussed for a conservation or a sustainability reason, but in the long term, they are the right reasons socially as well as environmentally, and it turns out to be economically also.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, less is actually more, and you're able to provide better and more sustainable solutions, which actually are costing less money.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, we're doing more with less at all our facilities.
Yeah, so that's a win-win. Natalie, tell us a bit more about the deeper insights into your research. The snow seasons, the snowmaking and water usage, that was very important. The Scope 3 emissions, and yeah, a little bit more diving into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, we're seeing shorter seasons happening, and to maintain those seasons that, you know, these communities often need, or companies need to maintain their economic feasibility, there's this need for a large increase in snowmaking, and it's different ranges kind of across the region. So some are seeing 100% increase in snowmaking required to maintain their season lengths, where other regions, Ontario is one that's, you know, going to see upwards of 400% increases in the snowmaking that they're currently using production rates to maintain feasible skiing conditions, and that obviously comes with increased water use, increased energy, and the related emissions. So it's quite drastic. But the interesting part, it's, you know, not a huge amount of emissions overall if you sort of think of the whole scale of a tourism system and an economic system. So if these communities are dependent on ski tourism, and these are companies like Vail and are major economic sources of jobs and opportunities in these communities, increasing snowmaking to maintain that ski season so that these same people aren't, you know, flying over to Europe or flying across the country to get their skiing in. It can actually kind of, overall, there's not a major increase in the emissions that are being used. So if we like to think about the tourism system and the emissions used to fly in a plane, those Scope 3 emissions that are, you know, outside of the control of companies like this, are often much, much larger than the actual emissions that are being produced, you know, at the hill, at the resort. And so there's a lot that these resorts can be doing to reduce their emissions, but at a, you know, that's about often, you know, less than 5% of the emissions of a total tourism trip. So If they can be doing things to reduce the emissions at that level, it's great. And then, there's a wider conversation that needs to be had about the role of tourism and travel and that in combating climate change.
So when the local facilities are providing better conditions, better service, that then is going to reduce the need to be traveling. And of course, in these economic times as well, people are happy to be able to stay local as well. So that's for sure. I'd just like to share a fantastic story from this morning, which I think is really relevant. Art Lucy, who is part of the Lucy, of course, very, very famous family here in Lake Placid, having been involved in winter sports and competitive sports for generations. And he was telling me this morning that his first coach here, who came from Austria, who at the 1980 Games, there was no snow that winter. So not dissimilar to some of the winters that we've experienced in different parts of the world recently. And they had to produce artificial snow. Now, this is 1980. This is a long time ago, before really such installations existed. And he was Austrian, his coach, and he was appointed as the chief of course for the Olympics. So this was his decision at the end of the day. We will never need to have this artificial snow in Austria and in the Alps. This is completely impossible. This is completely unnecessary. And so this was the first thing. And then the next one was Vail was also the first resort, Lake Placid was also the first place to have grooming machines in order to properly spread the snow and so that it was prepared in a great way. Because until then, it had been about, like you see them doing on the ski jump hill in some cases, boot packing it and ski packing it to make it relatively packed down. And suddenly they came up with these machines. We will never need such machines in the Alps. We have so many excellent skiers, and this is not necessary to have these cars driving around. They will not do as good a job as we are doing. And, then we see now just how important it is. And I think one of the important things to consider is the fact is that the snow is such a fundamental driver in the welfare of so many communities around the world. When you do live in this region, and you live in the Alps, you live in different parts of the world and the country and the continent, where winter sports, and it's not only elite sports and even sport, it's the recreational effect, that is the livelihood of the community. And that's why it's necessary to have this technology that can protect that. It can protect the jobs. And the jobs don't just mean working on the hill and being there for the sport, but it means the restaurants. It means the hotels, the taxi drivers. It means really everybody who's engaged during that part of the year, actually when their business has a lot of people there, even down to the shops and the supermarkets and so on. So I think that this is a very important point to underline, and I could see that Mike was itching to give us some further input, please.
Well, I think just with the tourism communities and how the resorts make a difference also, we certainly have installed EV chargers at our facilities for our guests to plug in cars. We've invested in electric Zambonis for the ice rinks. We have hybrid grooming tractors. So there's a lot of things that are behind the scenes, but resorts do have a ton of infrastructure and everything's made more and more efficient.
Yeah, I can echo that. We're of course looking at where we can put in more EV chargers and make sure that we can encourage guests, to be pivoting their transportation methods. I know I'm located in Stowe, Vermont, and we're really encouraging hotel guests to ride the shuttle instead of driving individually up to the resort. We've, been working on looking at, snowmobiles. We've gotten a couple electric snowmobiles, and certainly grooming machines. They're not quite there yet, but hopefully every time we're buying a new piece of machinery, we're looking at how we can get the most energy efficient machinery. We're constantly upgrading our snowmaking to be the most energy efficient guns that we can have. That way we can be producing more snow in less time, with less energy. And yeah, idling, we rolled out a program this year for all of our fleet vehicles. So an anti-idling, we want all of our fleet vehicles to be idling for no more than a minute. And we really encourage our guests to partake in that as well. So yeah, across everything we're doing, we're looking for, ways to include the guests, but also behind the scenes. It's not always the most glamorous projects, but boiler improvements, lift heater controls, anything that we can do to save energy. We're always looking to tackle those projects.
I think one of the important things that came up in our Zoom preparation call, and I'm just going to read this so I get it right. This is the one area when it comes to sustainability, the future of snow, the health of the industry, where these guys are not competitors. Vail Resorts, Order, Powder Company, and all of the owners of the resorts. Everyone is working together in the interests of the industry as such. Of course, they all want the clients, but at the end of the day, what's more important is that people have faith and believe that there is a future for snow. There is a future for these activities. And you've set up the Mountain Collaborative for Climate Action. And this is a partnership with Vail Resorts, Altera Mountain Company, Boyne Resorts, and Powder. And it's the ski industry's first unified effort to combat climate change with shared commitments around sustainability and advocacy. You guys both want to talk to that?
Well, certainly going way back to 1996, we're fortunate that we have a powerful association, the National Ski Areas Association, who has leaders that have identified climate change. And in 1996, we formed an environmental committee. We helped draft a doctrine called sustainable slopes. And we pushed these best management practices from the leaders of the resorts that were making these changes to every single resort throughout the country, whether they were a member of the association or not, just because it was the right thing to do, and tried to give everybody a tool to make the decision-making process easier.
Yeah, I know. So the Mountain Collaborative for Climate Action kind of was, another step in that direction of banding together the big four resort operators. So it covers over 70 resorts, and just giving that platform to look at what can we do together, because if just one of us goes down this path, we're not going to make a dent in tackling climate change, and we all need to be on board, whether or not we're competitors. And so where can we identify, areas that we can't do something alone? I think, like I mentioned earlier, waste is a big issue, especially in the remote locations that many of our resorts are in, and looking at opportunities to work with other resorts on really pushing the haul or pushing the collection, so that we don't lose access to recycling, or can we start composting? And so, it's been, it's a new initiative, and so it will still take some time to gain traction, but we really are looking to be collaborative together, because we need all of you, we need all of us, this is a global issue, and so we can't do it alone.
And it's not only the resorts who are involved in these actions. If I can perhaps just talking about an initiative that we were very much involved within the Ski Federation, and connects also with FISU and our activities, is the involvement of universities. And I'd perhaps just like to share an initiative that was taken on board by the Norwegian Ski Federation, together with the University of Trondheim, which is in the middle of Norway, you would say. And Trondheim is very, very active in winter sports, especially in Nordic sports. Most of their best cross-country and Nordic skiers come from this area, and they will host the Nordic Skiing World Championships in 2 years, 2025. And they are using their technology from fishing, from storing fish, their crushed ice technology, to produce snow above zero. So this is actually using a technology that already exists and is widespread in the fishing industry, to be able to produce snow above zero. And for a country like Norway, which is located at sea level, it's another important way that they can do that. And that was a partnership not only with the university, the national federations, and also the international federations for snow sports, for both skiing and for biathlon. And I think that this is something that we can, as FISU, we can help also accelerate through other universities located in winter areas. Last winter, I was involved with the Beijing 2022 Olympic Winter Games, and I'm an honorary professor at Beijing Sports University, and they were very much engaged with the technology connected to the snowmaking in the resorts there, building efficient, sustainable, low-energy usage technology to be able to service the resorts. Mike, tell us more about, Natalie. Yeah, so now we're touching on your world, the academic world, and you guys are leading the way.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to highlight that, the more that we can realize that low emission future, the less we're going to have to rely on technologies like this, which are quite energy intensive. And while it's great that they can produce snow at this levels, or, it's cool to see that Beijing, held great competitions at the Olympics. It was run entirely on man-made snow, which takes a lot of energy, and furthers that climate change impacts that we're seeing that are causing us. So it's a bit of a cycle. And so if we can, the more that we can do to reduce the emissions and reduce the impacts of climate change, the less reliance we're going to have on these energy-intensive technologies and adaptations. So it's a bit of a cycle, and hopefully we can be on the cycle that's trending down and reducing our reliance while still using these technologies in ways that help us have the competitions and the skiing that we all want to see.
What we've also seen is that the technology that's in place for snowmaking is also serving other very, very important purposes. Moving back to Norway, I can use the example of an indoor snow facility that they've built in Oslo, rather near, in the middle between the airport and downtown. I mean, to build a indoor ski center in Norway would have had people turning in their graves in the past, that's even necessary. But then they realized, that means we can go cross-country skiing in the summer. And as they're all cross-country skiing freaks, they're pretty happy about that as well. So they see it from that side. And the energy that is produced is actually providing this to an entire a new housing community. And so they are actually serving the area in a very effective way. I can see you shaking your head. I mean, I'm a non-specialist in the area, but seemingly it's been a very effective system where they're contributing back through the energy so it's not lost in the system effectively, and they're able to power and to provide that to service a community.
It seems ironic we're talking about
Yeah, I agree with that one, no question. But the point is that they're having, they don't want to just stop at the snow sport level, but they want to make sure that there's no wastage from what they're doing. And we also see them serving swimming pools and the heating for that too.
Yeah, I think, Mike mentioned earlier the heat capture and, using everything we can to do a closed loop system. And, we really look at that. In the Northeast, we have a new composting hauler who's taking all of our food waste to an anaerobic digester. And so through that process, energy is captured, and then they're able to combust the energy and put it back onto the grid, and then the heat from the combustion is used in the system as well. And so I think maybe putting a ski inside isn't what we want to be moving towards, but I think looking at efficiencies, to be capturing all the heat generated, and anything we can to continue efficiencies and use any heat that we're producing.
So we've got 15 minutes left, and we're now going to turn to both you in the room and online questions that might have been submitted to be able to get some of those and some feedback from you. Doesn't even have to be questions, can also be observations and input and anything you'd like to contribute. And I'm actually going to be kind to the panelists compared to how Mike threw it at us yesterday, and give you a bit of time to reflect. Before we get for the rounding up, which will be the opportunities that have interested you in combating climate change and the future of snow that you might like to implement moving forwards, other than a magic wand, or in addition to a magic wand. Please.
So this is Kurt Steger from Paul Smith's College here. Natalie, you're the amazing science person in this panel, and I just want to give you another chance to tell people who don't know about your study a little bit more nitty-gritty about what it was. When I read it, I was electrified. I've been working on climate change, for a long time, but it really hit home for me because you specifically mentioned Lake Placid and put in clearly stark terms what we're headed for and what this choice is before us. But if you could name some of the cities, what 2050, 2080 is going to look like in these two scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about the Olympic study. So we looked at all the former Olympic locations and the future scenarios of climate change. So short term is considered 2050 and long term is 2080. And it's to understand the conditions that athletes are looking at, we surveyed 400 winter sport athletes, Olympians or World Cup level athletes, to get their perspective on what's, ideal temperature, ideal snow conditions that they're looking for. And so trying to figure out which locations would continue to have those conditions in the future. And, Lake Placid was one that is going to see, some rain on snow. They're more likely to have, narrow snow conditions. So that's what we've been seeing across Europe in the World Cup, is where they've got competitions going, Alpine, Nordic. Yesterday's athlete and activist panel had, this great picture of a strip of white ribbon of snow, and they're competing where there's no snow on the edges. So all of those things aren't great for athletes. It's not fun to compete in, and you kind of lose that whole winter culture that's around the sports in the Winter Olympics. And so places like Lake Placid are in the high emission scenario. That's increasingly likely. And we've even seen it, in Winter Olympics. The Vancouver Olympics the ski cross was jumps built of hay bales with a thin layer of snow on top of them, and they're flying in snow last minute. Beijing Olympics was entirely man-made snow. Sochi Olympics.
Until the games, and then we had snowstorms.
That's true.
Had to postpone all sorts of things.
But yeah, Sochi is another one that was already, their sort of baseline is these warm tropical conditions. So those are ones that are going to increasingly see the impacts of climate change, whereas other locations like Calgary, Salt Lake, those ones are a lot more resilient to, an increase in temperature in the Calgary area, where the average winter temperature right now is -20, isn't going to be as impactful as, moving from -3 to -1 or 0. That's where you're going to see those changes. So some places, Sapporo is another one that's quite resilient. But again, all seeing definite warming across the board.
So, what other questions have we got?
Sorry, I have a question from Heather in Colorado, and she wants to know what she can do as a skier to reduce her footprint, during her ski outing.
Yeah, I think, kind of what we mentioned
Colorado
before.
is the heartbeat of Colorado Vail Resorts. We'll obviously have Meta talk to that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the means to drive an electric vehicle, if you can get on public transportation, choosing to stay at a lodging that is has commitments and is, I think just making the choices, if you don't have to fly, if you can go to a local, if you already live in Colorado, going to your local hill, I think are all ways that you can reduce your footprint.
What about in this area, Mike?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and one of the things that resorts can do is help spread the message and educate the masses. And it isn't just transportation, which in the rubber tire market is a little more difficult to solve than in an urban environment. But just simple things of reduced salt usage and slowing down make a difference. So we're trying to, amplify the Department of Transportation's efforts for reducing salt in mountain terrain and areas by constantly messaging our guests and tell them to drive slower and that there's environmentally sensitive areas. We're looking at trying to make a difference with all kinds of metrics and variables that we can.
I'd just perhaps like to add, it's not connected to Colorado, but in Switzerland there's now a group of resorts that, Julien, you can perhaps comment on this. There's a group of resorts who now belong to a kind of an association where the lift ticket also gives you access to the train, the Swiss train, and the trains go into so many resorts. And it's also law that every village which has its own postal code has to have public transport that serves it. And public transport in Switzerland in the winter also includes ski racks, so it's very, very convenient. And it's been the case in Austria for a pretty long time as well. And I'm sure that more and more countries want to provide this level of integration with transportation and then the mountain access too. Unfortunately, in the US, it's not really the case. I had the pleasure of going on the last ever train trip from Denver up to Winter Park. This was magnificent, this fantastic train that did it, and then it stopped.
John Rosales, St. Lawrence University. Earlier, Natalie, you mentioned that if we collectively achieve our goals under a low emission scenario, we can save winter. And what that means is to get to net zero by 2050. So the question I have is for Mike and Meta at your organizations. Do you have those goals? And where are you at right now? How much have you actually cut your emissions, say, since 2015, like most of the countries are measuring from 2015? Thank you.
Well, John, as you know, we're in New York State, has very aggressive and ambitious climate change regulations right now. So we're certainly being pushed. But since 2015, we've added 5.3 megawatts of solar for Gore and 2.6 megawatts of solar for Whiteface. We're using less power now. We're going to hybrid and electric machines. So we have been internally taken on an evaluation to see what our reduction is, but we've been making the steps to make that easy, and we're tracking all our metrics so that we can provide that information when we do make that study.
So just perhaps as we're now coming towards the wrap-up for the panel, opportunities that have interested you in combating climate change and the future of snow that you might like to implement moving forward, Vail Resorts, Order, and any other tips that you've got for them, Natalie, from your research?
I would just say I think, it's much bigger than a ski resorts. And I think it's great that they're doing what they're doing. And I really think the impact that ski resorts can have is that in many of these small towns, they are the largest company or operator. And so they've got a lot of opportunity to assist with, municipal level or regional level, national level goals and push larger policy. Like you're saying, there's this New York is pushing strong policy and being that piece within a small community that otherwise doesn't necessarily have the resources. I know Vail's got tons of resources that they're putting towards sustainability. So having these initiatives that, and as they create systems like renewable energy and opening that up to these small rural communities that would otherwise have, difficulty transitioning towards sustainability. So I think resorts can be a really great ally in that, especially in these small rural mountain towns that it can be a challenge to shift towards sustainability. And without ski resorts, often there would be their next industry could be resource extraction and these other things. So if tourism can be an ally and supporter in helping that sustainable transition, and then on a larger scale, I think a big conversation needs to be had about air travel and that aspect of tourism, as that's a huge source of carbon emissions that isn't really being addressed and fixed at this moment. So
move to Switzerland. Carlin's already given you that advice.
Yeah, to jump on the question that was asked also, Vail, we have set net zero emissions by 2030, and we are tracking fairly well on our goals to that. I think, having this wind farm that hit our 100% renewable electricity this year was a big jump in that, but obviously all of our, combustible emissions that come from grooming and from all of our on-hill operations are something that we need to work towards in the next, before 2030 and definitely before 2050. I would say, I don't have all the numbers off the top of my head, but we do publish an annual sustainability report. So definitely check that out to get all the nitty-gritty numbers. As far as the question, I think what Natalie highlighted, as we work with communities and our local utilities to try to get renewable electricity locally, it opens it up for the whole community and not just the resort. So that's been something that is really exciting, and I hope that we can continue that. And yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities that I look forward to, driving.
So the magic wand, Mike, what are you going to do?
Well, I think just one more thing, just to, we're partnering with communities, in 2018, the Olympic Authority partnered with the Village of Lake Placid, the town of North Elba, and the Lake Placid High School, and we committed to measuring many metrics, and through the U.S. Green Building Council, we became the first regional community to receive LEED Gold status. And now that we're renewing this and updating the metrics, which is a 5-year requirement, we're expanding the Olympic region even further and adding in more communities. So we are stronger together than individually, and trying to make sure that the message is amplified loud and clear. But this included, many small businesses as well as townships and municipal systems, so that the baselines could be established and the improvements could be quantified.
Great. So I think we've done pretty well. in terms of covering the subject. Our FISU executive committee members, Julien, Samir, some input from your sides, anything to add, anything you would like to share, and any observations from any of you guys? Do you feel that the future of snow has an important role to play in your lives? Yes. Hands up. Hands up if you do. All right. Fantastic. And we're all going to work together to ensure that it continues to play an important role in our lives, in the future generations as well. And our students here at, for example, the FISU World University Games take it very responsibly as well. They care about the future of snow a lot, and for sure that we will continue to make a big commitment to that through our sustainability strategy. We're going to, for sure, leave no stone unturned and make sure that we're standing right behind it as well. We know that it plays an important part in people's lives, in their welfare, in the livelihood of many communities, and it takes all of us to take responsible actions in order to ensure that we protect and that we move forward for the future of snow. Thank you very much for your attention. It was nice to see that we didn't drive you to a siesta, but hopefully we're going to have another session that's going to be great before you wrap up, and then enjoy a Sunday afternoon with a nice walk or a nice bit of activity before enjoying your evening.
Thank you very much. Let's give another round of applause to this panel. Great discussion. Thank you, Sarah.